session to work on our EAP with the Community Power Coalition. I believe I'm being recorded, so I wanted to be official with it, which is, EAP is our electric aggregation plan. And so, Henry, do you mind just starting with a really brief overview for Emily, who's likely will be confirmed this upcoming month as a member on our committee, just what the Community Power Coalition is and what we're doing?
Yes. So, Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, it's a newly formed organization in the state. It's a public entity. It is operated on a not-for-profit basis, and it's a power agency. It will procure electricity on behalf of its, right now, 19 city, town, and county members. And Newmarket Community Power is a program in early stage development by which the town can approve this plan and then become the electricity provider for the cities, the residents and businesses collectively. So there's sort of an economy of scale, and you pool your purchasing power, you buy electricity together, and you get to choose, have greater choice in where that power comes from, and potentially save costs also.
And you said newly, so how recently?
So it was incorporated on October 1st of last year with 14 cities and towns came together, and the structure of the organization is that each member city or town appoints a representative to the governance board, to the board of directors. So it really is an organization of, by, for those member cities and towns. They created it, they control it, they have full oversight over its finances and its operations.
And that's until it hits, I think I read 21 members, is that right? And then there's elected representatives after that?
That's correct. So the bylaws put forward that once there are more than 21 members, at the annual meeting, the membership of towns will collectively elect a board of between 11 and 21. More cities and towns can join after that, but at the annual meeting, there's an election that sets a board of 11 to 12 reps.
Cool. Okay. Thank you very much.
So this is, I think, the first work session on the electric aggregation plan, and what I'll do is I'll just sort of start to walk through the document. There were a number of comments, questions, edits, and we'll address all of those and talk through them the best that we can, and we'll see how far we can get.
Okay. And just, I'm sure you have opinions. Okay, I'm not worried about you, but if you see anything as we're talking that you may disagree with or think should be worded differently, please feel free to speak up. Nobody's going to hurt my feelings as to stuff that I wrote in there.
And just to clarify, it sounds like Emily's already done all of her homework, and so I probably don't need to clarify. But so this is our electric aggregation plan that it's essentially like a 60-page document that has a bunch of fill in the blanks, and we're just here to fill in the blanks. Joe already kind of took a shot at it, and Henry's going to walk us through that. And then, of course, like we already mentioned, there'll be several work sessions, and then we'll eventually, with our voting members and a quorum, vote on what we want to send to the town council, and then they'll probably have a whole process of their own with lawyers and stuff, and it may come back to us. But this is our very first crack at this.
So I'll dive right in. There's cover page. I don't know that we need to spend any time here, and I'll sort of just quickly walk through the table of contents. So it is a lengthy document, and it has increased by 2 new attachments recently because of regulatory requests from the Public Utility Commission. But we'll see how far we can get. There's an introduction. There's an overview of what Newmarket Community Power is, and we'll walk through all of the different aspects of that. There's also an overview of Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. And then there is a section on Newmarket's community power goals, objectives, and requirements, and this is where a lot of the input from the committee and the town is going to be helpful to sort of clarify what are your policy goals, what do you want to achieve. So this is a more customization in this part of the plan. Electric aggregation plan statutory requirements. This section, header for header, mirrors the legislation that makes this possible, and in the legislation it says you must create a plan, and it must include these things, and it must go through a public committee with public hearings and town council approval. So we'll talk about that. And then there are a number of attachments that are less substantive for the plan and more, here's some helpful background on the legislation, the renewable portfolio standard, which is a renewable energy goal that the state sets by law. More details about the coalition, and just sort of like some of the technical background on how energy markets work. So these are more educational, informational, and less really going to affect your plan. And there are 2 new attachments. This is the beginning of the track changes from the original template. So we'll talk about these 2 new attachments if we get there. But again, just complying with the Public Utility Commission request to have some more detail in the plan.
Has any of the 19 members filled out these new attachments, or are we the first?
So the City of Lebanon they reapproved their plan with new attachments. So after you've approved a plan by your town council, the town council can approve modifications. So the City of Lebanon has done that, and now the 7 other members that have brought their town through a town meeting approval, I know we don't have that here, but they are in the process of integrating these 2 attachments as well.
All right, so we have some that we go rip off on.
Yeah, so that's where this comes from.
7 have had town meeting approval. How many have sent forward an EAP that they've approved?
To the regulators?
Well, to you all.
Yeah, we work closely with all of the communities that have done the plans. So yes, 8 of the coalition's members have approved by city council or town meeting. Mm-hmm. And then 4 of those, there's a requirement they have to submit it to the state, to the Public Utilities Commission. 4 of them did that, and in each case, the Public Utility Commission rejected those plans without prejudice because primarily the rules weren't done. So they hadn't finished writing the regulatory rules, so they said we can't approve these plans until we finished our job doing the rules.
And as we get to the fill in the blanks, will you cue us in as to like what the other towns have said?
Yeah, we can definitely focus on some. There's some orange text in here that is meant to be customized by Newmarket. So that's just a quick overview, and then we'll start with page 1 here. And let me just have you read the plan?
I got about halfway through it.
Okay. Great. It's definitely it's a technical document. It's industry specific and jargony in ways. So that's why we're here to sort of talk through this. But so the introduction, it sort of goes through the legislation, which was amended in 2019. It's a bipartisan policy. It's really meant to enhance economic efficiency by giving communities new authorities. And those authorities are to provide electric power supply, notify customers, and then have them be automatically enrolled into the program and allow them to choose to opt out in most cases. If customers already buy power on their own, they can opt in, but they're otherwise not affected. To procure electricity, comply with renewable energy policies, offer a range of different services, form a joint powers agency. So that's what the coalition is. It is a organization that is formed by municipal governments under municipal authority and controlled by those municipalities. So it will never operate on a for-profit basis or issue stock or anything of that nature. And so that's sort of just the high level. And I don't know, I could talk about this graphic. I know there's questions we want to get to. I'll jump in if there's anything, but I'm just going to keep sort of scrolling. So that's just sort of the cover page. And there were some comments here that perhaps we can touch on. So
I added that in other major electric utilities. I don't know if you have that. I mean, further down with Newmarket, I guess is Eversource is the default service provider.
I'm realizing I think I forgot to share 2 attachments, but yes. So you were asking if you should list other utility companies. Mm-hmm. In Newmarket, there's only one electric distribution company. It's Eversource. They own all of the poles and wires in Newmarket.
They're the distribution, but people in Newmarket can actually pick other energy providers.
Right.
Liberty, but I don't know what some of them are. That's why I was kind of wondering, do we need to say that here, where it says offered by Eversource, and do we need to say that there are also other?
So I would not advise that you prohibit the program from launching if its rates are not better than every single competitive supplier in the marketplace. What we're doing here is creating a new default, and you want that default to be better than the old default.
Okay.
And so that's really the goal here.
Are you okay with that?
I mean, has there been discussion by other towns on, I mean, so what if the town of Newmarket decides that it's worth an extra cent to have as their default a clean energy source? Like, what, do we have to accept the price as a trigger point?
So that is, I think, really the intention of why this is orange, is because many communities want the goal of, we're only going to do this if it's cheaper, but some may say we want a default that does come at a premium, and that's a decision the town could make. So that's just a policy question for your committee and your council is, do you want to say we will only launch if the rate is lower than Eversource, or do you want to say we will launch, or do you not want to make that restriction?
My preference would be, I think we are always worded in here that we, as long as we are competitive with them, I'd rather not box ourselves into a situation where it has to be below.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, is
Right.
I don't want to box ourselves
Right.
to where it has to be below, because if we can have 100% solar for a penny more, then I think, and because we are not forcing the residents of Newmarket into that, because they can always opt out and go to Eversource, right?
Right.
So because of that, I think that we want to be flexible and say this is something worth having a little bit more, a premium, as you said.
But the wording actually says right there that
It's competitive.
lower than or competitive with. So I
Right.
would prefer to leave that competitive with wording in there.
Of the other EAPs that were approved by their respective towns, did anybody change this and say, within a certain margin, they were specific, or?
I can't remember exactly who, but I think one or two did make minor changes, and one was required lower than, as
Okay.
opposed to or competitive with.
So they did box themselves in.
They did, and another one may have, I think, gone the other direction and not committed themselves to that
And
at all.
was that just striking that language entirely then, or how did they do that?
I actually don't know the specific one. I'd have to follow up on this. But I guess I'm curious. So do you feel strongly about keeping or other major electric utility companies? I think so. For me, that's confusing because there aren't other distribution companies, and I think you want to reference competitive suppliers. But I don't think you want to require that your rates are lower than other competitors.
I definitely don't want to do lower, and I think by keeping the word competitive,
Right.
it takes care of that. So the actual question is then, do we want to add that other statement there and other utility energy suppliers or whatever?
And I understand why you added that in general, because you're trying to say, look, we don't know what's going to happen in a year or two. What would be available to the people of Newmarket in general is the overall picture.
Right.
That we have to, as part of the overall picture, acknowledge that there are multiple power sources.
Right,
But
and it says
specifically in this sentence, I don't want to lock us to have to be competitive with every single major electric utility company that might be available in the future. So, because I mean, that's even a higher threshold to lock us in. I mean, what if, one of them, whoever it is, Eversource, whoever, is super cheaper, and then we wouldn't be able to trigger this. I'm kind of leaning towards striking the entire piece, the entire sentence.
Just what I added.
Well, striking the whole orange sentence, saying that we're not locking ourselves in, or we might be able to say.
Well, I disagree with that. I think we need to. It would be.
The program will only launch, so the fact that
And
the sentence
maybe a
starts.
clarifying point as well. So it will only launch with a lower rate. It is possible that at points in time that rate will exceed Eversource's rate. You're not precluding the possibility of it ever exceeding Eversource's rate, but because of some of the structural advantages I can get into, and what we've seen in other states, there's high confidence that it will be a better rate than Eversource.
Can we word it like the program will launch upon the town council of Newmarket deeming that the product offered and the rate offered is, basically something to the effect of worth it, right? That it is a benefit to Newmarket.
How do you feel about that?
I'm really trying to leave us as much leeway as possible.
Okay, so we definitely want to strike what I put in there, and
Okay. So for now, we'll do that.
yeah, just take that out or reject the change.
Oh, yeah, that's a good.
Do you have the other EAPs of the other towns on hand, Henry?
So I'm using Councilor Lamatino's.
Yeah, no, I didn't
Here.
mean this one. I meant if you just happen to have access to those other towns' versions, because I'm curious if they did something similar to kind of give them as the maximum wiggle room. Emily, if you have a thought on this, I welcome it.
So maybe I'll just make a comment here as well.
I mean, the fact that the sentence starts with only launch if is automatically boxing us in. It's saying that we won't, that there's certain conditions where we will not, as a town, we've already committed to ourselves not launching it.
Well, okay, just to be clear though, if the town launches this, there are commitments that the town has to make. And I can't see us launching it if, the rates are significantly higher than Eversource.
Right. Well, but I'm saying that we leave it, that orange sentence there be to the effect of leaving it at the discretion of the council is essentially what I'm saying. So that we're not prescripting any particular conditions under which we will not launch it.
Isn't it at the discretion of the council no matter what?
Well, passing this entire document is at the discretion of the council, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then there's a couple steps in between, but once we sign the commitment, then we're committed to what we passed, right? Yeah.
So further down in the statement there, does that cover what her concern is, the town council in coordination with the advisory support from the Newmarket Energy Environment Committee, here and after referred to as the Aggregation Committee, who we authorize to arrange?
Oh, so Joe, you're presuming that the EE will become the Electric Aggregation Committee in addition to being the EE?
Well, that was the comment that I made there, that I because in the document they keep saying Electric Aggregation Committee,
So
I just made a reference that we are.
We are the
and
committee.
the role of the Electric Aggregation Committee is precisely what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Oh,
so,
but that role would that role not extend then further after this is adopted?
It may, you can sort of have it continue to provide advisory support to the council
Okay.
in decision making.
But that sounds like what we would do anyway.
so I'm sorry, but so does that statement, that sentence there, cover your concern?
Will be authorized to arrange and contract for the necessary services and power supplies to implement and operate the program, set custom rates prior to program launch, and continue to provide oversight over. It doesn't, well, it says implement, but it doesn't say like that it launch it, that we as the aggregation committee or that the council with us are in charge of when it launches.
I have a question. So, what are the chances that this is going to come in more expensive than Eversource, like based on your experience so far?
So there are some structural reasons why what community power programs do can get better rates than what utility companies do. The utility company is regulated, and the regulators say every 6 months go to the market, put out an RFP, and take whatever price they give you for 6 months of power. So they're a price taker, say 6 months at a fixed point in time in the market, and they have no control over when they go to market or how they buy power. What Community Power Coalition will do, and what other competitive power agencies do, is they time the market, they have a portfolio of different contracts with different suppliers, and they're sort of actively playing the market and managing risk. And for that reason, we see these kinds of organizations deliver electricity more cheaply.
Like, have there been any cases where that wasn't the case?
Yes, so there are, so part of, again, the reasoning behind putting community power forward is individual residential customers. They don't have a lot of buying power, and there are sometimes fly-by-night energy supply companies that hook the individual residential customer on a low teaser rate, and then maybe it gets higher. And really what these programs are doing are putting more oversight into that and giving you buying power to, really it's about hiring the right experts who aren't kind of the sleazy salesman.
No, that makes sense. I guess I'm just trying to assess what the risk is. Like how, because I understand the concern, and so I'm just trying to, what's the risk of us, how likely is it that it will be more expensive? And we will be
So that's the reason the template and the other towns have this language in here, is because they want to right up front have a commitment to not charging customers more than they would be charged by
A commitment
Eversource.
to the cheapest rate. But I mean, the point is that that sentence, that initial orange sentence, is kind of shackling us to say that if we got something that we as a town, the council, was interested in taking up, well, this really good solar energy that's really competitive, that they wouldn't be able to do it if it says competitive. That's kind of like a nebulous term, like what is competitive. We could either try to define the term competitive, leave it completely open, or just say essentially it will launch. There's more risk in saying when it will launch than when it won't launch, and that sentence is saying when it won't launch, right? It will only launch if, meaning it will not launch under any other condition if it's, more expensive or whatever. So that this is, protecting the idea of having the cheapest rate. If we wanted to be, risky, then you would say something like it will launch if it's cheaper, or it will launch if it's, whatever. So what I'm saying is we just give the council the maximum power and just say it will only launch if the council has determined it to be in the best interest of the residents of Newmarket, or whatever.
Can you add that as a comment for the?
The program will only launch upon the council determining it is in the best interests of the residents.
Right, or the best interest of the town.
Because I know several places in the document here it uses that terminology, competitively, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's, you sort of have a couple of options, and maybe you can come back to that and figure out which one is preferred.
Because that way, if there's like a really great thing and it's 1 cent more than Eversource,
Yeah,
then the town council can say, yeah, let's just go for it.
I think what you did here, it made sense to me. You're sort of, you're inserting the actual name of the committee, which is what was intended, and then you're saying you're referred to as the Electric Aggregation Committee, and
Yep.
that made sense from the coalition's perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so customer notification and enrollment. So this is telling you how the notification process will work. So everyone in town will receive a notification, and there's 2 types. If they get power from Eversource, they get an opt-out notification. It says, welcome to Newmarket Community Power. Here's your rate. You are in unless you check the box and opt out. And then for customers that buy from a supplier already, they get an opt-in notice. They say, hey, Newmarket Community Power has launched. You're unaffected, but if you want to join, you can choose to join. So that's what this is saying here. Let's see. So the mailers go 30 days before the program is launched with instructions on opt-outs. And then if there are new electric hookups after the launch of the program, there will periodically be a process where they are also brought into the program. And then this is completely voluntary, and any customer can switch back to Eversource or another supplier whenever they would choose, with no penalty or exit fee. This next page shows the electricity load of the town, and the committee had previously requested this data from Eversource, and Eversource makes that available. So you've got the 2 categories: the utility default supply. These are the ones that are automatically enrolled and can opt out because they get Eversource power. The competitive supply customers, these are the ones that can choose to join but otherwise are not affected. So you've got 4,000 accounts on the residential side, 381 commercial industrial. You can see the numbers here, and it's about the total of 25,000 megawatt hours. That means anything. And this could be updated if you want to put in another request.
Is it? Yeah, it was based on. We got it last year, so it was based on 2020.
Yeah, so 12 months ending July 2020.
I think it's interesting. I mean, this is neither here nor there, but if you look at the total line, it's really interesting that the people who've opted out of Eversource make up about a fifth, but approximately a fifth of all accounts are opted out, but those 1/5 make up 1/3 of all the energy used. So essentially, if you're using more energy, you're more likely to pay attention to the cost of that energy.
Exactly. So it's largely the commercial sector that chooses where their energy comes from and gets that advantage.
So my comment there.
Oh yes. So this is a good question. So there is a requirement in it, and I'll just sort of read the actual language, but it says in the event that there are too few customers in one of these categories, the rules change to keep their anonymity. So if there's just one customer, you don't share that and then say here's their electric load, because that sort of violates their privacy. So what the rules say, the draft rules say, is with respect to monthly load data, if there are fewer than 4 distinct customers or any one customer comprises 50% of the total usage in any non-residential customer rate class, that data will be combined with a similar rate class and be reported with that similar rate class. So say there was only 3 commercial customers, they'll just lump those into another category. So that doesn't apply to street lighting. And then there's the same thing for residential. If there's less than 10 residential customers in a rate class group, they won't share that data as is. They'll lump it in with something else to protect privacy.
Is this Eversource policy that you're?
This is the Public Utility Commission draft regulations.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't apply in your case. You don't have too few customers in any one group. So Newmarket is a founding member of Community Power Coalition. The town was one of the 14 incorporated members, and Councilor Tony Weinstein attended that incorporation and participated. And on the board of directors are Councilor Tony Weinstein and, as an alternate, your town manager, Steve Fournier. So it's the coalition it's created to allow the communities to access shared resources, to streamline the process for their electric aggregation committees in drafting plans, which is what we're doing now. To help them jointly solicit a contract for service providers. We talked a little bit about this, but there is currently a request for proposal for the companies that will manage procurement, and the communities are overseeing that process and will select a company to manage the buying of electricity. Thereafter, there's a greater economy of scale and joint power solicitation, so buying power collectively, sharing knowledge, collaborating across the state to develop local infrastructure, and then working on policy issues in coalition at the State House and at the Public Utility Commission. And this formation was based on really 2 years of work and really a year of research on national best practices by a small team in New Hampshire, including Lebanon, Hanover, Nashua. They looked at Massachusetts, New York, California. They sort of came to learn that this coalition approach really has the most benefit, and then they designed the Joint Powers Agency and created it. So this is sort of just referencing some of there's more background reading we could get into and overview of the coalition. I don't know if there weren't any comments or questions here, but I see we've got the one coming up. So this is a good question. I'm not sure. Do you know if the council has, made a decision, made a motion to designate the Energy Committee or the Energy Advisory Committee as the Electric Aggregation Committee?
They have not specifically done that, but our charter, I forget how our charter is worded, is to come up with plans and whatever to advise the town council on how to proceed.
This is one of those, sometimes it's more formal, sometimes it's less formal, sometimes it's sort of like, yeah, our energy committee will be the electric aggregation committee, and sometimes it's, let's make a motion and get this documented, and it's kind of time by time.
Well, I remember, and this is when it was Tony on instead of you, but before it got approved by the council, when we were discussing this within the committee, we said, and I don't know if we sent a document that said this to the council, but we did say, okay, we will serve as the electric aggregation committee. So I just don't know if that was approved by the council formally, or if, like you said, it's kind of an informal thing.
Yeah, so this could be, I guess, just worth circling up with the council and saying is making, I mean, yeah, I have no reason to believe this wouldn't be appropriate wording, but you might just want to double check.
Okay, so, throughout the document, we referenced the Energy Aggregation Committee in, okay, so I understand what you're saying, that we need to have the town council specifically say that the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee should serve as the, okay.
Yeah.
I can bring that to them and do that.
Okay. And there, I have in this comment, I reference a draft motion that you could make use of. It's fairly straightforward. Just, elected official moved that the town council hereby establish hereby designate the Energy Advisory Committee as the Electric Aggregation Committee pursuant to RSA 53E.
Okay.
So you can just copy and paste this language if you like. So what the purpose of the plan, this is largely pulled from the legislation, but provide universal access means everybody gets equal treatment and reliability, and unless they are actively choosing different products, so there can be choice within where somebody could choose to opt up to more renewable energy and pay a different price for that, and then there's other sort of time-based electricity rates that folks could choose. And then at a minimum, the program will meet the renewable portfolio standard. The state sets a minimum renewable threshold for all electricity supply. It's 22% right now, and it'll go up to 25% in 2025, and that will apply to Newmarket. So you'll have a minimum renewable portfolio standard requirement, 22%. Also importantly, adopting this plan commits the town to nothing. It just gives you the authority to, after the plan is adopted, launch a program if you choose. So there's no commitment in approving this plan. The commitment comes after. And then you had a question here.
What was my comment?
So you asked, what does it mean to set rates? It's a good question. So I can talk a little bit about that. So the sentence is, the town council retains the power to contract for required program services, electricity supplies, to set rates, and pursue related projects independently of the coalition. So what this means is, by adopting this plan, you're not committing to using the coalition services, you're not committing to using anyone's services. That commitment actually comes later, and you can still choose another provider or the coalition. And what does it mean to set rates? So with the coalition, what will happen is there will be, after this plan, a financial reserves policy and an energy risk management policy. And those things govern, they delegate authority to CPC&H or the coalition, and they say, you can buy power within these parameters, and you will accrue you'll accrue revenues from the program to run the coalition and for Newmarket's benefit. And so that will be outlined in those policies. And until you adopt those policies, no one is authorized to set rates. Their alternative is you could just sign a singular contract for a fixed price and say, okay, this broker came in with a 10-cent electricity rate, and the town council would approve that contract, and now you're setting a rate at 10 cents.
Okay, well, all right, as long as you've got all that wording there, that I'm sure that's gonna, I think from like where I'm coming from, where the town, I think will probably say is, we don't want to, as staff, we don't want to get into a situation where, we're setting rates and,
Right.
looking every day to see, okay, what are the rates, and, do we need to raise them, do we need to, I don't think the council wants to get into that, I'm sure they don't.
I see. So that is precisely the purpose of creating the coalition. So each town doesn't have to do that, and now the coalition will have one set of staff that are experts in buying electricity, and they will be overseen by the member board and provide that service. So yeah, No one is anticipating that any of these communities will have to hire more staff. So this, once you have public hearings, so it's required that you have 2 public hearings on this plan. So you'll just punch those dates in here, and you'll, this is just saying that this committee developed the plan, and here's when your public hearings were. I attend a lot of those hearings as sort of to answer any technical questions, so I can be available for that. I think I struck this. This is no longer necessary. And this just says that if the town council votes to adopt the plan, they then become authorized to contract for services to launch the program. And that would be those contracts with the coalition if you choose the coalition. Implementation process. So this is just recalling that on August 18th, the town council approved the joint powers agreement. That's the contract that created the coalition and has its bylaws. So that's documented in your council meeting minutes. And I could probably insert a link. Maybe I'll just make a comment there. Again, so the joint powers agreement, that's the contract that created the coalition, and it includes the bylaws that govern it, say how many board directors there can be and how it will function. And a key part of that benefit is the liability protections. So what you've done is you've created a new legal entity that will hold the liabilities associated with buying electricity and shield the members from it. And those liabilities will be non-recourse to the members, and you sort of have a firewall between you and this new corporation that is signing the contracts and holding the liabilities. Just recalling the various members, so there are 19 members and they're listed here. And again, this plan does not require you to participate with the coalition, but it assumes that that is a likely course.
Henry, I put in a comment, but it doesn't appear that I'm on the same shared doc. I just hit edit and it brought up Google Docs, and I'm on, and I have both your and is a technical issue, but I just want to make sure that my comments don't get lost if I continue to add comments.
So if you do want to take comments as we're going out, that's great, and if you can just be sure to send me that document after.
All right, I just don't know. I was like, I'm not on there.
Yeah, so this is
I should be popping
not
up,
live.
and you should be popping. Oh,
we're not in Google Docs. We're just in the
Oh,
hard
you're
drive.
not live. I'm live. You're not
Yes.
live. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought there was something wrong I was doing.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just called on my end.
No, we could next time have a live document, but yeah, definitely do send me any comments that you have.
Okay. It was just that initial one. I figured out like what I wanted to word.
So participation in joint powers agency governance. So I've already sort of talked through this, but the board of directors is constituted of representatives appointed by your town council, the select board, the city council. And what they are doing is so I actually might say what we've done elsewhere. And am I tracking right now? How do I turn on track changes? Is it this? For everyone? So this is ongoing currently. So we've done this in the other plans, if that's all right with you all. It was drafted sort of in future tense about a year ago, and that process is occurring right now. And I know that Steve Fournier participated in the last board meeting. I think he actually made one of the motions. So anyway, what the members are doing are overseeing adoption of policies, election of officers. We have a chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, various committees. There is a committee CEO and staff search committee to hire a CEO. And there is a risk management committee that is doing the RFP, the request for proposals, to hire vendors, and that's happening right now. And so on and so forth. I just made, again, this is updating the old template. It's not only the founding members that are on the board, it's all members up to 21, like we discussed. And let's see. Yeah, so you had a question. I don't know if you want to speak to this at all. Can you all see?
I mean, I'm just going
Yeah.
on my computer.
So you asked, oh, this is about the 21 members on the board.
You said, I assume Newmarket agrees with this. Newmarket town manager should review.
That's not speaking to Newmarket, though, that's speaking to the coalition itself, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything I could
No, that comment was kind of like, the town council should, has to take a look at that, I guess that's what I meant, yeah.
I mean, did they not already understand that when they, I thought they already
Right,
knew that when they
it-
joined.
Isn't that the point of having one of our?
Right, literally one of the 21 is Tony, so.
Yeah. Like that, like we can't do anything about that now, right? Like even if they wanted it to be different.
I don't know what I meant.
That's all right. Let's see.
You said this references the bylaws of CPC&H included with the joint powers agreement, so.
Yeah.
It's a done deal.
Yeah.
The only things that aren't done deals are in orange, right? So.
I mean, you can do what you like with it, but we encourage red line, and we encourage you to let us know what you're doing, just in case there's an inadvertent change that doesn't comply with law or sets you up in the wrong way.
But if we for example, if we change that, what are we saying? We're only going to be a part of you if you change your membership from 21 or your
Right.
board from 21 to 20.
Right. Doesn't align with the reality.
Right.
I think, I don't know. I think we're good on this one.
I think so. I'm interested to get into the actual goal setting.
I don't know what I meant.
Maybe
It's all right.
when you were reading it, you thought it was referring to something with
Like,
the town council.
yeah,
Yeah, you might have
the
thought it
town
was
was going to put forward 21 people or
Yeah.
something, and that's, yeah.
No,
Which is understandable. The language, it talks about so many different entities and
Yeah,
you're
you
like,
can
they're all
probably
the same
expect
thing.
it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just remove this comment.
Yeah.
And I'll go back through this
Mark is-
after the fact.
Resolved.
And I think, so you have another comment here. This section needs to be reviewed by the town manager. I agree. I think that it's good for the town manager and legal to take a look at this document in
I
detail.
guarantee they will.
Yeah, they absolutely should.
Okay, now that I think about it, I made that comment, and then when I was reading the rest of it, it said, this whole section's gotta be reviewed. I think that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, and I encourage that. We certainly
Well,
encourage
I
that.
guarantee they will.
Yeah. So this is talking about the cost sharing agreement, which is obviously sort of where the rubber meets the road in a lot of ways. This is also at a high level detailed in the joint powers agreement, and I'll talk through it briefly. So one, these programs are self-funded using the revenues from electricity sales. So your tax base will not be affected. Town taxpayer dollars will in no way play a part in this. So I guess except if there are incidental costs with implementing, so if you have a lawyer on town staff review, you can do that, but you can't expend, that's an incidental to startup. That's not an actual operating cost. So no upfront costs required. I sort of just described, this is just more words to say the same thing, that the sale of electricity will provide the revenues to pay for the coalition and the staff. And I think it's going to get into, the categories of cost. So this will be worth spending a minute on. So there's three categories that costs will be tracked in. Direct project costs, member services, and general and administrative costs. And the general and administrative costs, each town pays pro rata based on the amount of electricity they use. So that's sort of like a equal price per member because you're all sharing those same general administrative costs.
But it's still incorporated into the cost of the electricity.
Yes. But so there's another category of cost, project cost, and those are not shared equally. Those are only shared by members that choose to do those projects. A project could be, let's sign a 15-year power purchase agreement with this solar developer to build a solar array and buy their power for 15 years. Say Durham does that, Newmarket can choose to do that with them, or it can choose not to, and if you choose not to, then those costs in no way flow to Newmarket ratepayers. So you just sort of silo the different towns for the optional add-ons.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said this already, but the debts, liabilities, obligations of the coalition and other community power programs are non-recourse to Newmarket. So you're not on the hook for those liabilities, other than what you're choosing to buy in terms of electricity contracts. Let's see. Town manager is under no obligation to rely on coalition services, or the town is, rather. And then, you can withdraw from the coalition at any point in time prior to launch at no cost, and then if you withdraw, let's see this. Yeah, you can still decide to procure services independently or withdraw from the coalition, subject to the terms and conditions of your continuing obligations in the agreement that you adopt. This all has to be sort of done through the traditional public meeting process. So this section here, I think this one might be, I think we might have some comments, but this is just mostly a background section, I think. Let's see. This is where you had a comment. We could talk about the section, we can get examples. What else can I tell you about the cost sharing agreement?
At this point, probably not much. Okay. I think, do you have examples of just, the 3 bullets, just so I'm clear in my mind what they are? Or?
Yeah, so.
That's what I was kind of like getting at.
When you think of the example, there are, so that would be the project cost.
Right.
So, covered that one.
And so there's the cost sharing agreement, and then the reserves policy, the risk management policy. Those are to be developed late this summer, early fall, with the coalition, its general counsel, and its hired portfolio manager. And then those will be sort of socialized and circulated to the member communities for review. I could share examples from, they're sort of, all power companies have a version of this. So there are other examples, but we don't have a coalition example yet because we haven't concluded that RFP process. That, though, that's, sorry?
No, I'm saying, I'm okay with that at this point, but I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot more questions as well.
So yeah, that's sort of just outlining in the future, if you want to launch, there's a couple of key things that will have to happen. But this plan doesn't commit you to doing those things. It just sort of lays the path forward if you were to choose to do them.
It's the what we're going to do, not if we're going to do it. The if comes later.
Yeah. So let me see, what's this comment?
He was saying it sounds like Newmarket needs staffing, authorize the town to request access. But that's literally what we already did. Once to get data from Eversource, which we're going to need that data to figure out, how much energy are we going to need and what our growth rate. We'd actually need data over several years to figure out what a projected growth rate is. So it's just literally we're agreeing to get our data from Eversource for this entire process.
And there's two data requests actually. There's the one you've done, and then there's after you approve, you can authorize you can get the detailed data. So you've got aggregate data, which is just residential customers, this much usage. After you approve the plan, you can actually request how much usage for each individual customer, and that will be anonymized. And that's something the coalition does for you. So you don't need to hire staff to handle energy usage data for every customer, because the coalition will do all of that.
What is the need of having individual building data?
So you'll be billing through Eversource. Each of those, or the coalition will be billing through Eversource each of those individual customers.
I see. So we can build them.
Yes, you can build them, but also to have
that makes
more,
sense.
to have, it's a little more granular data than, the aggregate is really good for early stage planning, and then when you really want to get specific about buying power, it can be helpful to have more.
I forgot that if we're providing a default power source, that we're going to have to build them.
Yeah, and again, the town won't have to build them, but the coalition will
Right.
work through
No,
Eversource to build them.
we meaning
Yeah.
as members of the coalition.
Right. And I think I do, I like when communities do think of the coalition as them, because it really is.
Whole point of the word coalition.
Right.
Yeah.
It's in the name.
So this is just background on, the coalition's been participating in the state regulatory process for years now. And Clifton Velo is really the leader there. He's the chair of the board, and he wrote the law, and he was a regulator and a state senator and rep, and he's really one of the key leaders behind this. And so again, just highlighting the value of these towns all sort of coming together and working on state policy. Clifton Velo is amazing, and he gets a lot done, and he's more able to get things done when he is has a lot of community standing behind him. Okay, so let's take a quick look at these graphics. So I might zoom in a little bit. So this is just showing the three sort of so you've initiated the process, you've approved the joint powers agreement, the coalition has been established as a joint powers agency, you have a committee, but you might have town council make that a little more specific. And you're drafting your electric aggregation plan. Once it's drafted, you have to have hearings and then pass it on to your legislative body. In your case, that's town council, and then you'll approve it. So that's the phase we're in now.
It looks like halfway through, but it's actually all the work is in the second half.
And this is, again, this is a part where the coalition really steps in and does a lot of all of the work, really. Well, not all of the work. We'll talk through that. So you've approved your program. You'll submit that to the state and the utilities, and the state has 60 days to reject your plan if it doesn't comply with the law for some reason. And if they don't do anything in 60 days, automatic approval. So the board is currently overseeing the startup activities, adopting policies. They've hired a few key folks, one of whom is me, and they are doing that solicitation process.
In my version, that graphic is X'd out, and there's an additional graphic below it. Is that?
I saw that too.
Okay, so are you on the,
No.
you were on the online version?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes, so these were modified in the update to the template, and let me make sure, this is the correct one then.
Okay.
Yes, so thank you. This is the old graphic.
You should just be working off the online.
My apologies, I just.
No, it's not yours.
Because he couldn't use his iPad.
On the, you couldn't get your laptop on the.
Yeah.
No, I don't have the right adapter.
Oh, poo. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just gave him, I got the email.
No, it's fine.
So you're overseeing startup activities. The Public Utility Commission on July 5th, next Wednesday, is going to publish final rules. Those then got to go to the legislature, to a committee at the legislature to get fully approved, but we're almost through a long and onerous regulatory rulemaking process. Then the PUC will approve your plan after your town council does, or before, but generally after. And then, so these are the two other big ticket items: the cost sharing agreement and the risk management and financial reserve policies. So that's sort of when you're saying, yes, we want to implement this program. So these are the two things that it sounds like, I don't know exactly what your timeline is, but you're going to take a while with the committee on the plan, then you're going to have your hearings, then you're going to go through town council. Then all of these things happen. So down the line, these will then be, we'll all have learned a great deal through that process, and then this will be a decision point.
That's what makes us obligated at that point.
Not necessarily. That's actually in the next graph.
Okay.
And then, so this one's also updated. So here's the new one. Then you get that detailed usage data we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
The coalition will oversee procurement in compliance with your plan and those policies we've agreed to. And that there's sort of a, procurement doesn't happen in a day. There's a month, a multi-month period where basically the longer the better. If you have a longer runway, then you can set up a more advantageous portfolio.
Well, that's good, because I think, if I recall correctly, last time Eversource gave Peter the runaround for a long time.
Yeah, it can take time working with utilities. There will be, public outreach, and some of that's sort of your public hearings, but the part of the RFP with the coalition is also, the mailers and things like that. So Eversource will provide the mailing, the data, send those notifications, have a public meeting, and then the program is finally launched. So a lot of steps here. Questions on any of that? So I don't know that there's anything controversial or critical in this section. Just more background for you.
There's a comment from Joe asking about needing to add staff hours, but it looks like you answered it.
Yeah. So what this is attempting to say is, what the coalition does is it prevents you from having to hire new staff.
Right. That's like the big thing. We don't have to do it on our own.
And sort of more background. There's a lot that goes on in policy and regulation for electricity, and it's important to be sort of a stakeholder in that process to ensure that it's not disadvantageous to your ratepayers. And again, just sort of the coalition's. This is just detailing the various legislative hearings and regulatory things the coalition is involved in. Services. Again, sort of background stuff, but let's talk through a little bit of it. And definitely just interrupt me if there's questions. So obviously new rates, and then aiming to lower supply costs. The energy risk management and financial reserves policies. So I talked about this a little bit, but that's the procurement where it's a diversified portfolio as opposed to a single contract, which is potentially more risky. And the financial reserves. So in this, procurement across all these different towns, we're really unpacking what are all the different costs. How much of this is flowing to electricity? How much of this is flowing to our risk management staff and our overhead? And then how much margin do we have? How much are we accruing in reserves for the coalition? And that's important for a couple reasons. There's sort of a minimum threshold of revenue or margin that will ensure the longevity and the financial stability of our buying power. And you save a little bit up for a rainy day fund in case prices rise. You can sort of eat into your reserves you've accrued. But above that, the additional margin is for the members to do with as they will. So one member might say, we've got some breathing room, Eversource rates here, our rates here. We want to push that rate a little lower, collect less reserves, and lower rates for people. Another town might say, we want to keep that a little bit of a higher rate, and we want to collect more revenue for other projects down the line. And that's sort of built into this is many of the communities are thinking about jointly contracting for construction of new renewable energy and battery storage and financing that through long-term contracts through this program. So this is we kind of get to the middle of the plan, and I think we get at one of the main reasons a lot of communities are doing this, but at least it's there. Again, just talking about intending to contract with the expertise to make this all possible, and that process is well underway. And talking about hiring staff. So this gets a little more into like some of the fancy things that could come down the line. So intelligently moderating use of electricity from the grid during times of high wholesale power prices when the grid is constrained. So generally customers have no sense of when is electricity expensive, when is it cheap. But it is more expensive on high demand times, hot summer days, late afternoon, everyone's using air conditioning. Those are the high price times. And what community power can do is sort of help people begin to shift power away from those times to collectively lower our energy costs. And there's different ways you can do that. One is a time of use rate, so you can just have a price signal that says, okay, it's between 3 and 6 p.m. in the summer. There's a higher cost of electricity, and folks can choose to use that and pay cheaper rates to run their appliances at night. Really, what you can get into is some of these programs that are more advanced, particularly in California, they're deploying energy storage, so giving folks home batteries, using those to soak up cheap electricity in the nighttime, provide resiliency, backup power, and sort of collectively lower costs by starting to shift around when energy is used.
In the 100% clean energy resolution, it talks about the creation of an energy plan, including efficiency measures, and it sounds like that could really go hand in hand with this. These could be some of the efficiency measures we adopt to meet that plan. Definitely
hand in hand. Sort of like they're two sides of the same coin, where you want to lower your usage, and that comes first, and then you kind of want to start to get into how can we shift it. So exactly. So this is sometimes called like retail products and services is industry jargon for that. Time-based rate options, group net metering, targeted efficiency, distributed generation, sort of listing the potential avenues that could develop over time, and that the coalition is very actively thinking about how it will move into those areas. Mm-hmm. And again, it's more the same sort of, this is about lowering electricity supply costs, lowering risk, and lowering bills for customers. And, really aspiring to become the coalition to become a known entity, but Newmarket Community Power as a brand to become a known entity that is responsive to the needs of your customers. And being something that everybody's excited about being a part of.
All right.
I have a comment on that one.
So I guess these two things scroll differently, which is confusing me a little bit. But oh, you have a comment here. Did I miss one? No. So I think
the last comment he had was the one about adding staff that you answered.
Yeah.
I'm just going based on only the highlights for the comments, since I'm on the live version, and that was the last one up until where we are.
So yeah, you had noted that this should be looked at carefully by the town, and I think that's good. And this is regarding that energy risk management and financial reserves policies. So this is stating that Newmarket Community Power's ability to maintain competitive rates as market prices and Eversource default rates change over time is a primary goal. And that to the extent that you have competitive rates, that will reduce the risk of customers leaving the program.
Mhm.
So it's in the interest. It's a key motivating factor.
And I was just thinking, because the commercial users, like I mentioned at the beginning, you know, are disproportionately more and more likely to opt out to whatever's cheaper. So you know, even if there's a slight difference, you might lose all those commercial. But I'm also thinking, if we market this correctly, I mean, you have businesses that can like market, hey, we're 100% or whatever, you know, we're all this green energy. So that's kind of, it might make up for whatever they might stand to save by switching out.
So Hanover's thinking about this a lot because they've got Dartmouth, they've got a couple big energy users, manufacturer too, and they're like, how do we, one, let's launch and let's get good rates, and then let's build relationships with those big users and let's bring them into our program.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's quite possible that because of the buying power of this coalition, that the rates will be even more attractive than what one of these companies might get on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
But just, you know, trying to get it out, like you can advertise as having green energy or whatever.
I agree on that. Even if it's just a little bit more expensive,
It might be worth
if
it.
they can say, I'm using green energy,
Right.
blah, 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 it's a
Exactly.
big drop off.
So the forthcoming energy use management financial reserve policies, the purpose of these policies is to ensure that Newmarket Community Power allocates customer revenues in ways that balance the community's goals and objectives over the short to long term. And they will define how the coalition will conduct energy risk management, procurement, and market operations on behalf of the program. And let's see. This is to ensure that you're able to, or what the coalition will do is forecast and plan for potential adverse contingencies. So be taking an active look at the market to make changes as market conditions change, which again the utility cannot do. So the industry has known for a long time that this natural gas price spike and the electricity price spike that is happening right now was coming. And they could see the trend coming, and a lot of them entered into various types of contracts to sort of hedge and protect themselves to some degree against that. And the utilities, maybe they could see it coming, but they can't do anything about it. They can't get out of the way because they have to go to market at this set date set by the regulators and just take the price, and that happened to be the peak of the market. So that's sort of the opposite of, you know, structuring this diversified portfolio, and how that can help protect you against changes in the market.
Again, a lot of this part here, this is beyond us. It's Tom has to look at it from, you know, their perspective of liability or whatever.
And then, you know, part of the rates, again, is setting aside funds into financial reserves, and then drawing on those reserves as needed for rate stability and ensuring the adequate cash flow of the coalition operations. So you have you accrue revenue, accrue the reserve fund, and then that protects you if prices spike, and that enables you to sort of have stable operations.
I mean, Joe just made a comment about liability, but again, we're describing what the coalition is doing. Newmarket doesn't have to do anything in particular on this. The liability is held. We don't have the liability.
That's correct.
Well, potentially, they could have potential liability here.
I don't.
That's the whole point of the coalition, right?
Yeah.
To take the liability on.
If the town says, okay, yeah, coalition, you do everything for us, you know, we're hands off, yes, then I agree that, you know, the coalition is doing all the work here. But again, I think the town just has to take a close look at that and make sure that it's covering all their bases.
And when we get to the end of this overall section, let me see.
Yeah.
Before I state anything, at the end of my page 16, I'll have a bio break for everyone, if that's okay. If people feel like I need it.
That sounds good.
I
Yeah.
need it. So,
Are we planning on working through the whole document?
I don't
think so.
think
Okay.
so.
You let me know. Yeah.
Curious.
We can end at a nice stopping place sooner, but I will have a hard cutoff at 9. How about that? Because
How are we
9 is, anything past 9 is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the absolute latest I would like to go.
Right. How about this? Okay. So, I mean, it kind of sucks because the meat of it, if I'm not wrong, Henry, is the next section, which is Newmarket Community Power Goals, Objectives, and Requirements. And that's really where all the fill in the blanks are that we get to dig into.
We could jump to that, try to do some of that, and then.
Well, we only have like a page left of this. So, I mean, I guess and let me just kind of straw poll and see what my other two, whatever members is.
Why don't we finish this page, do the bio break, and then come back and go into the.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's like a big thing to get into. What do you think of that section? Is it something like we should just wait and like?
If it's 8:15, maybe we spend 25 minutes on it.
Okay, all right. Whatever people think. Does that feel good? Okay, all right.
And this is all in reading through. I've read through these many a time, and we did just do a modification. I think this is all important detail, but it's more sort of here's the mechanics of how all the stuff works behind the curtain, and it is a lot of detail. So let's see, we did this. So and again, like how it works behind the curtain. So for example, initially the coalition will launch because third-party companies and financiers will expend cash upfront to make this all happen under deferred compensation or at risk. So they don't get paid until it launches, and then it begins generating revenue, and then they get paid out of those revenues. So upfront, we're relying on the cost of capital and other, in like third parties to do this work. And to the extent that you can build your reserves and your finances internally, you lower your financing costs and you lower all of your various costs, and eventually you get a credit rating because you are financially self-sufficient and sort of a credit-worthy entity. So that's sort of like it's more cost-effective to build up your financial reserves than rely on somebody else's financing. And then more details on how developing those reserves can allow you to contract with developers to build generation or battery storage. Yeah, so I think this is, again, it's more just nitty-gritty behind the scenes. I don't know if we should go through every single bullet, unless folks really want to.
I am personally fine with skipping straight into our goals.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, there's nothing here that we can really change or override here. Again,
And it's not even necessarily dictating anything, it's more informational. It's more like, here's how things work. So I think maybe we take a quick break and then we'll do this section. Would that be good?
Do other people want a break? Because if I'm the only one, I can power through. It's not a big deal.
No, take a
All right.
break.
All right.
Sounds good. I know it's dense.
All right.
So you're joining the committee?
Yeah, well.
Pending the council's
idea.
approval.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was any doubt. Her going, I already know it's 21. It was like that's it. She sold. reconvening,
Yeah, so we're on to I think maybe some of the funner things.
the fun part.
So Newmarket Community Power goals, objectives, and requirements. Oops. Sorry. Let's get back down here. There's some. I think this was you. You put this in renewable, carbon neutral. Is that? This is your change.
Yeah, I put the,
Yep.
what did I say for comment? Did I just add it?
It just added it, but
Oh yes.
I'm to blame here for that because the wording of the resolution, which I authored, says renewable and carbon neutral, so it makes sense to keep it
Okay.
in the same language as the resolution.
So yeah, that's great. So Newmarket Community Power affords the town the capacity and flexibility to realize and build on our policies pertaining to renewable and carbon neutral energy, economic development, and infrastructure. So sounds like everybody's good with this.
I mean, it's energy in general, but I think that's clear that that's everybody's focus. That's kind of like the whole reason we want to do this.
Yeah, and then you can point to those policies as well. And yeah, so I think that's all good. And again, sort of, you pursue these through the program and through public advocacy to improve the policy landscape, and you can coordinate with other communities and leverage your collective expertise. And then maintaining competitive rates is, is also referenced again here. And then again referencing the coalition. So this is really, I think, what we want to get to. Newmarket's policy goals. So you've inserted a number of items here. And is this quoting from something specific, or is this, maybe you could just tell us a little bit.
I think the first paragraph, if I'm not mistaken, Joe is quoting the language that created the energy environment.
Yeah. Yes.
And then after that, the second paragraph is actually quoting the resolution that has not passed yet, but I think might.
Okay. And then the master plan vision chapter. Yeah. So this is good.
So, yeah, I'll just add, I mentioned, in looking at what Newmarket has for policy and, the master plan is very lacking. There is nothing, basically. There was reference in the master plan of that comment there, but then when I asked, okay, what is it referring to, I asked the town manager what it's referring to, nobody knows. Some wording that was put in the master plan at some point in time, but they never followed up on it. So.
And Joe, am I correct in understanding that this is essentially what you have copy pasted here from the master plan is
Yes.
the extent of the energy reference in all of the master plan?
That's correct.
So, and this is why also the resolution that will be heard by the council next month includes a commitment to create a comprehensive energy plan. And
But it doesn't actually, I forget how, I don't know, get the wording in there somewhere. It doesn't actually come out and say that, or?
it does. It says it explicitly.
Um,
I can pull up the language
or
if you
it
like.
doesn't, okay, I don't know. For some reason, I was covering the bases, basically saying, okay, we need to develop the wording for the master plan.
Yeah.
And give that to them, because, they're not gonna do it.
Well, then that's just it's
Okay.
kind of unfortunate that we
So, is there
don't.
anything else that you wanna add in here, or into this part here, policy goals? Or is there anything else that we need to
Just to
add
be
in?
clear, the resolution does say the town of Newmarket shall, with the advice of the Town Environment and Energy Committee and any other resources it deems necessary, formulate a comprehensive plan determining the best methods and timetables to maximize energy efficiency and transition to alternative energy sources in order to achieve this goal, meaning the 100%.
So maybe we could copy paste that.
Sure thing.
It is copy pasted in there. It is included either.
Not that
in the
in the
attachment.
first one. Oh, you mean that paragraph is? I didn't see it.
The whole,
Oh, the whole resolution.
resolution is
Okay.
is in the attachment itself.
Oh, in the attachment.
And you could,
I'll just put the functional part. There's the whereases that come before, but I'll just put the actual resolution part in the comments in this section as well,
Okay.
so that we all are on the same page.
And yeah, then if there's like a lengthier thing, you can put that in the attachments. And I think some of the communities, got rid of this section, or they just put it all here, or some of them didn't, they had very sparse policy goals, so it was easy. All kinds. So goals and Newmarket Community Power objectives. Yeah, so striking, offering optional products, supply options, higher low levels of renewables, time varying rates. So yeah, this wasn't something you felt was part of the objectives of the program.
I crossed that out. Why did I do that?
Let's see, is there a... Oh, this was the same, do we need the other energy suppliers? And I think we discussed that already. But yeah, some folks, they're not interested in the time varying rate options.
Should we unstrike that?
I actually was busy copy pasting, so
That's what you talked about before with like giving people insights into energy usage and.
I think we do want to offer additional products.
Yeah, I would want to strike. I don't see why we would strike that. Seems like that's a big part of the benefit is like handing power of choice over to the consumer, right?
Oh, I see what you do have a comment. You said you strike this line because it's covered under enhanced customer focus bullet.
Oh.
So you said that here, this covers it. Yep. So that's a good point. It's a little bit redundant, I guess, if you say, time varying rate structures, and up here you're saying. So what do I? Oh, this is the one. Yeah. So how about higher and lower levels of renewable energy? You want to keep that? What if we just struck?
Whatever you guys want.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Let's do that.
I get renewable energy in there as many times as possible.
Yes, you were commenting you need to be clear that revenues from only energy receipts and not taxpayer funds. Yes, that is at least it's explicit elsewhere and perhaps implicit here. Oh, so I see you're inserting the word energy. So yeah, I see no reason why not to do that. Because you're not depositing taxpayer revenues. So let's go ahead and consumer protection, public advocacy. So the oversight of the coalition will ensure that these are fair contracts and they represent the interests of the customers, and that the interests are also represented at the legislature and the PUC. Customer focus, this is that fancy sort of shifting energy usage and transportation, electrification, etc. Cleaner local power. Prioritizing in-state renewable energy, if possible. Community resilience, so supporting local contractor training, education programs to lower barriers to the installation of clean energy technologies. Regional collaborations, collaborating with other municipalities and agencies to develop projects jointly for renewable generation or storage or electric vehicle transportation.
I mean, these were all the like customizable pieces, but I think I like everything that's here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. So, and then grid modernization is kind of another catch-all. You know, if some of the more innovative things are to happen, that will eventually require smarter electricity meters to collect information so that you can take advantage of that shifting of energy usage. And then, you know, you're intending to reduce fossil fuel consumption, enhance reliability, create savings and value, and attract and support local businesses.
I have a comment there. I think I was just, do we need to, again, do we?
Yeah, so it's because they're the only distribution company.
All right, I'm fine with that.
Okay. So this is, you know, I think we discussed this right at the outset, but this is again referencing the immediate objective to have competitive rates and accrue reserves to ensure the longevity of the program. You know, if the program has higher rates, people will opt out, and the program will fail, and it won't be worth it. It'll really succeed if it is competitive.
And just to clarify, because this is like the third time that it says, you know, we need to be competitive with Eversource. I mean, Eversource is the only distributor, but not the only power supplier, and we're competing with their supplier cost. And there are other suppliers, right? But the original logic of we don't want to include all of the suppliers in that statement, because by including them, then we're raising the bar for us launching this, right?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
So we just stick with the other source.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's sort of the part of the thinking is you're creating a better default. That's just the basic
Right.
floor that everybody's at.
Right.
So anything above and beyond that, you're not specializing like that. You're
Yeah.
creating a baseline.
It's who's going to be our default, and we want to be our default.
Yeah.
And the only way what most towns have decided is that they're going to be their own default if their price is cheaper than Eversource.
And I think this is a helpful sentence. So it's really a balancing act, and it's about balancing customer rates, renewable content, and accrual of reserves. So these are the three things, and they're in balance with one another. So sometimes renewable power is actually cheaper, but you know, balancing your rates. Sometimes buying more renewable power can counterbalance rates, can increase rates. Accruing more reserves could also increase rates, but if you don't accrue enough reserves, then you might be at risk later because you don't have that reserves.
I'm sorry, I don't understand why accruing reserves would raise rates. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know.
So it
If you
depends.
store it, is that why?
So when I say accruing reserves, I'm saying the revenue from the sale of electricity. So regardless, the coalition will generate some revenue and hold that revenue. And if you raise your rates, you can generate more revenue and have a bigger pot of money. And if you want to have as low rates as possible, you might squeeze down the amount of revenue you're generating. And then I guess if having a nice middle healthy reserve of revenues, that's helpful because maybe in 6 months or 12 months or 3 years, prices change or prices go up, and instead of just riding those prices up, you eat down your reserves a little bit.
Got it, okay, thank you.
So now I feel like I'm going to ask a stupid question, because I mean this is the first time I was thinking about the potential. I just presumed that the rate was going to be set by the cost plus the overhead, and that was going to be the rate. And we could, you know, if it's acceptable to us, we launch, and then it'll change organically as those costs change. But the Newmarket wouldn't have a hand in, like, for example, raising a rate so that we have more revenue.
So actually you could. So there's there's a floor of to get service with the coalition and to allow the coalition to have a healthy reserve for the coalition.
We have to pay the cost plus
You
the
pay cost.
overhead.
But say that cost is a penny less than Eversource. Maybe you say, well, let's tack on another half a penny to our rates for Newmarket special reserves. So there is
And that would
flexibility.
be Newmarket revenue.
Yeah, so the coalition will collect that revenue and on behalf of Newmarket, and then you can do with it what you will.
With no additional charge.
No, it's your money.
I just didn't think about that.
Again, that's where I don't see Newmarket wanting to get into any of that.
Well, I mean, okay, so they can't reduce the rate below what it costs, right? It costs for the power and it costs for the overhead. So, and that's all built into the rate. So there's there's that minimum that we're going to pay. But what he's saying is that if the town council needed money one year and had nowhere else to go to get it, it is a potential source of revenue that they could be like, oh, well, we can play with this and still manage to be cheaper than Eversource potentially, but like collect a little bit of extra money that the town could. I mean, it's only an option. They don't have to do that, right? Like you could just always have it at that floor, the cheapest possible. Is there?
I can't speak really for the council, but my opinion would be that the council's going to say, you guys handle that. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to go raising the rate.
No, and I'm not suggesting, I don't want to raise rates on people at all, but what I'm saying is it's an option that the council could utilize but doesn't have to utilize, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about building reserves. Is there a structural reason for CPC that we should be doing that?
So the members will all collectively have like reserves that are to make the coalition successful. So everyone will share their collective reserves, and that'll pay for the overhead and will pay for the coalition's collective reserve. And then there is the degree to which above and beyond that certain members may want to.
But that collective reserve comes from the payers. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
All the
So.
But
Well, it all
they're going to
does.
establish, okay.
But
we
from
wanna
that
have
minimum-
they're going to say we want to have reserves of X.
From that minimum cost. I see. So part of the overhead is saying you want reserves for the program. I see. Yeah. All right.
And they really are the members' reserves. Just the members are going to say, we want the coalition to succeed, so we want to ensure the coalition has enough reserves to be successful, because if it has very low cash, it will be more expensive and it will be at risk of price spikes. So you want to, that's one of the key things is
I
launching.
just presumed that was part of all the overhead, which it is.
It is. So the overhead's really three things. Its vast majority is energy. You're buying energy, and there's a couple parts of what that is, but you're buying energy. The second thing is you're paying the vendors, the service providers that are managing that procurement, and that's your overhead. So you could say overhead, vendors, and staff. And then the third is reserves. So that's the revenue above and beyond that.
Your cushion.
It's a nice cushion.
They need reserves too.
Yeah.
Like you said, credit ratings. And
I just was confusing the town's specific reserves that they have the option of creating
Right.
from this, which I'm not saying that they should, and then the reserves that the coalition was building to give themselves a cushion for operating.
And the exact details of how all this, like, is the reserve going to be in an account from the coalition on behalf of the member, or will Newmarket create its own new account? Like, so we actually haven't set that up yet. That's forthcoming, and that'll be part of the risk management and the reserves. There's the financial reserves policy. So we haven't set in stone exactly the mechanics of how this will all unfold.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see.
Near-term operational, am I wrong?
Oh,
Grid modernization is the last thing. Oh, and
we're down at near-term operational requirements, performance relative to utility, and net metering generation rates. Let's see, so let's see. So there's a whole, we won't get into the net metering right now. We'll save net metering for later. That's a dense one. This is like an example of what this might look like for your customers. So you could say that your default service could be 5 to 10% above the renewable portfolio standard, so more than Eversource's renewable energy, if the price meets or beats Eversource. So a better product for equal to or less cost. that would be what everyone's automatically enrolled in. You can change this if you want.
So, does Eversource's current renewable standard, is that the equivalent of what you said was like 22% right now?
That's correct.
Okay. So that wouldn't even put us
So yeah, this would
high.
put you at 27 to 32%.
Okay.
Oh, and all that's fine, or 50% or whatever's fine for now. I mean, if we're combining this thought with the resolution, the idea is we build up to 100% by 2030.
Right.
Yeah.
And this, you would launch in 2023 at the earliest.
But the more 7 years, the more towns join, the easier it's going to be to get to 100% in 7 years. Plus technology and whatever. You look so skeptical, Joe.
Yeah, I'm old.
100%'s a lot.
I mean,
It
it's fine
is.
to have goals and whatever, set the goal here, if you hit here, good.
Well, the great thing is nobody's going to come arrest us if we get to 80 by 2030.
And if you get to 80 by 2030, that would be incredible. And I mean, through this program, you could certainly buy 100% renewable energy. So the optional products, you could this is sort of basic service might be an opt down, so that's just whatever Eversource is doing, and that might be cheaper. Folks could choose Green Start, which would be 50% renewable energy, likely higher to or competitive rate with the utility, and then Prime would be your 100% product, and people could choose to pay extra for that. So this is sort of, it's meant to not have specific numbers associated with it because prices change over time. This is just setting your framework. Is this something folks are comfortable with?
Ish. And I kind of want to put this into verbal form at the beginning, and then the following points where it talks about what our trigger is when we're going to launch, because it's like, so it will launch when a product is available that meets or beats Eversource in terms of RPS and is competitive with its rate. So, I mean, it doesn't have to say that, but it just seems like I'd want to say that verbally at the beginning where we were talking about when it launches. That this is what we want. We want to be better than Eversource.
Well, right, because if we end up we can't offer less though, right? I mean, wouldn't that be?
Well, it's part of the CPC agreement that it would be it's at minimum 22%, right, which is Eversource.
Right. So, does that line add anything? I guess.
Probably not. I just kind of wanted it to be clear, because if we're going to say the trigger is a cost, I'd also like to say and a quality, right? Not just the cost, but also the quality. Which it doesn't need to say that because it says it in the rest of the document, but if we're going to have that statement, it was just my own thing. And that's for the basic, right? At a minimum, because then the higher premium plans are even better, but they can be more expensive than Eversource. All right. I guess I'm just struggling.
No,
I don't know.
Not struggling.
I don't know our town council that well, but I'm just wondering, like, if starting out with that kind of language, if any of them are gonna.
What do you think?
No, I'm fine with that. That you're putting it in words of not only are we going to be competitive in price, but we're going to do
Competitive with renewables.
It's going to do this at a percentage, greater than what is currently available.
I mean, that's the ultimate bottom line. We want to beat Eversource both in quality and in cost.
Right. Spell it out, because everybody's going to look at that. There's a lot of words here.
I'm
Yeah.
typically a graph person, graphs and bullet points and everything, but some people are very verbal and like prose.
So maybe this program will only launch if it is able to initially offer residents default rates that are lower than or competitive with those offered by Eversource and provide a higher renewable energy content.
Equal to or higher than.
There you go. How do others feel about that?
I'm fine with it.
And then, so I have to tell you, Henry, because now to make it even longer, when you get on the online version, I put in my own version, which added comma, or, hold on, let me go and see my exact wording. So I didn't do the energy portion, which you just added, but I like it. Or upon the determination by the town council that launching the program is in the best interest of Newmarket.
And that's one that maybe you all want to work on together.
No problem with the way she just said it. It's
Okay.
just that.
So tell me that
Don't
again.
change anything else that you
So after what you just wrote, keeping everything you just wrote, Henry, comma, or upon the determination by the town council that launching the program is in the best interest of Newmarket. And that's what I meant at the very beginning, was like, why don't we just kind of unshackle the town council and say they can launch the program when they want?
So yeah, and I might even say the program will only launch if, and I might sort of maybe do
Well, I
something.
took out the word only. I said the program will
Oh.
launch if it is able to initially offer residential default rates that are lower than or competitive with those offered by Eversource. And then you add the segment about the energy, and then or upon.
How do you feel about striking the word only?
It kind of is more committal, so I mean, that might be me being excited about, like, let's do this. I'm saying we are going to launch if it reaches that threshold, or if the town council says so.
I'm fine with saying no.
And it might even say the program will launch if, and I just wonder if this, because it's become a little bit of a longer sentence.
It is a longer sentence.
If maybe this is good for bullets or numbers.
I literally can't read the screen. I think, like they say when you hit 40, your eyes go.
Well, like the one on 40 in my eyes are.
The version of word that we town gives, it's horrible.
The program will launch if it is able to initially offer residential default rates that are lower than or competitive with those offered by Eversource and provide a renewable energy content that is equal to or higher than Eversource. Or upon the determination by the town council. I mean, it is a long sentence, but it does make grammatical sense. So.
And I think you also just might want to ask yourselves, when you're having public hearings and when you're reviewing this, are the folks of Newmarket gonna like that, or would they take umbrage with it?
That's kind of what I was asking when I was asking about who's on the council. Like, I just don't know.
Well, generally the council likes having, like any authoritative body likes having control. So the idea that they get to say, well, if we want to. Taking out only is the only thing that they might not like.
And they don't have to necessarily see the track changes. Yeah, but yeah, just to play devil's advocate, I can imagine some resident of Newmarket reading this and saying, oh, the town council can do whatever it wants.
Well, it can't. So according to the structure of that sentence, and this is why I struck on only, the town council can't prevent us from entering or launching if it meets those requirements, right? This is my legislative, the hat coming on. It's saying it will launch if it meets those requirements, or it could launch without meeting those requirements if the council says so. But the council can't prevent it from launching if it meets those requirements. And I did that on purpose. This is from writing bills.
I see, yeah.
That's why I said I was being a little excited and saying maybe we could be a little committal here.
I would maybe think about this a little bit, and I think it's a question of, do you want to trust that the council will make the right decision at the right time, or do you want to try to...
Well, so the first part is saying that we're committed to it. If it meets those requirements, we're committed, we're jumping in. If it doesn't meet the requirements, the council still has the option to jump us in. And I
will vote to, when I see that, I will personally say to the council, change that or to an and. Yes, and the town council determines in best interest.
I don't like and.
I know you don't like it, I know you.
I like or. Because and is the problem that Henry just pointed out.
I can guarantee you, you get any meeting with, 2 or 3 people, somebody's gonna have a different opinion.
And,
Yeah.
no, that's
So-
fine. I'm happy with different opinions. I'm in the legislature. But and it gives the problem that Henry was talking about, saying, well, then the town council can do whatever they want, and what's the point?
And I can guarantee you that if they heard that wording, that the or says, oh, they can approve it, or if it meets this criteria, it's gonna get rammed down your throat. They're gonna say.
Well, I mean, ram down your throat's kind of harsh considering we're going through a very prolonged process.
You said that.
Well, I didn't say ram down your throat. I said we're committing to it.
So I think we should all maybe give this a little more thought, and we should come back to it. And I think we've got some good ideas, and maybe we'll do a little wordsmithing and figure out exactly.
The problem is the original sentence said will only launch if is a negative statement, right? It's saying you're not saying when it will launch.
I'm fine with taking the only out.
Okay? Well, the taking the only out is what you're complaining about. If we put only back in, then it's still you still give the town council all the power.
Take out the only and you put and in there.
Both
We'll come
do
back
the same
to that.
thing.
We got 10 minutes left here.
Yes, let's see how far we can get. This is the first part of the thing was the thing that ended up being the most contentious.
I mean, this has been a good
go
process. So this next part talks about the renewable portfolio standard requirements that Eversource and everyone who supplies electricity is required to do. And it's maybe too much detail, but we could update this to 2022, which I might do. And it ends at 25% in 2025 under current law. And this is just showing, what that looks like. So
Joe, when you were looking up the creation of this committee, it's in energy and environment, because literally the last 2 years we've been calling it environment and energy.
I don't know what it is.
We don't know the name of our committee, Henry.
I'm pretty sure.
I've been there. I was on the Concord Energy and Environment Advisory Committee. So
Is it energy and environment? Or
we
so
spent
you
a lot
must
on
know Rob.
EAC, REC, EEAC, yeah.
Okay.
I hope it's energy and environment, because I've been changing everything to energy and environment.
And everything up until recently, which might just be your changes, was everything I saw was environment and energy. So we'll figure it out. I'm sure it's somewhere.
It's on the town website.
Okay.
So what this chart is showing is if you do that 5 to 10% a year, which was shown in the table, this top blue bar is the top of the renewable portfolio standard requirement. So this is what everybody has to do, and then this green on top is what you would be doing. And again, we need to update this because now we're back in 2021, but this is just showing you'd have that much more renewable power. And let's see, so I think this might be a good stopping point. This is just, again, one more time referencing the energy risk management, financial reserve policies, and saying that Newmarket Community Power's procurement, budgeting, and rate setting will be carried out in accordance with those policies that Town Council will adopt.
Okay. Because the next part is just the statutory requirements anyway, right? So.
Yeah, and there's some key details here, but I think maybe we'll pick up with this next time.
Yeah, I like it. Do people want to try to schedule our next work session?
What's next?
Our next meeting is next Tuesday, and we have a couple items.
Okay.
Although I know you'll still be, like a honorary member, but if people are amenable, we don't have that much to do next Tuesday. We could work on it next Tuesday if Henry's available.
I'm fine with that, but I'd also like to just have a discussion. Like I said, when I was going through what's out there currently, there's nothing. Okay, so I ripped it off from Rye and Lebanon, some stuff with the master plan. What I'd like to do is kind of like just start talking about that.
Great.
And we'll give it to the town council to say here, because they're not going to say, yeah, go off and do that. Just go up and do it and give it to them. So I'd like to go over those two documents if we can, but.
But that's related to this, right?
It is related to
yeah,
this,
so
yeah,
if we're going to
so-
do this, Henry, are you available next Tuesday? Is the question.
Let me check.
What is the 5th?
The 5th. And I know there's like a couple other small items.
Oh, it's in my calendar.
Oh, it's already in your calendar. Perfect.
So I have 7 o'clock Tuesday.
Yes, sir. So then we'll make, I'll send out the agenda obviously before next Tuesday, and I'll copy you, Henry, and we'll make this the primary focus, but we will have a couple other items of business.
Very good. All right.
I guess, is there any other, how's everybody feeling? Everybody feeling okay?
Yeah,
Just
we-
checking in. You're good? All right. Henry, how are you feeling? You
I'm
feeling
feeling-
like hopeful about Newmarket?
Yeah, no, this has been great. It's been very thorough, and we're talking about some complex stuff, and you guys have good questions. And
I
good
think
group.
that first sentence is the one that we're going to argue over the launch. But, all right. Well, if no one has anything else, I'll adjourn. All right.
Okay, so how do you want me to save that and mail that?
So